Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3640 43 maybe. Today's date is 15th of October 2025. It's been almost like morning at 7:38 a.m. Okay, today is kind of like a very different day. Okay, today that like basically is this thing. My content creation is something lagging behind. Usually, I'm making sure that I have 3 days of gaps, but unfortunately, because of last couple of days, I was like a little bit busy regarding about homes and things and that. Like basically, like couple of days ago, uh, my grandmother has shraddha. Like how do I supposed to say that? I'm not really sure. Like a kind of like some event is actually happened at 12th of October. So possibly it's this thing that I was kind of like busy and won't be able to do any kind of like a work, or able to do a work, but probably is this thing not able to handle both the things at the same time. So probably I'm kind of like a lagging behind my content creation. Okay, yeah. So yeah, like I'm actually uploading my content every single day. Yeah, that is no problem at all. But kind of like a something that in advance that I should supposed to be upload my content on social media platform in advance, that is not possible. Okay, like whatever I kind of like upload my content, it should supposed to be public. It should be went public tomorrow, and that is I don't want. I want that if I make my content today, then probably it should supposed to be went public after a 3 days. So I need a 3 days of gap for that particular thing. I have to be make a content. So today is a day that I should supposed to make two piece of content today. Okay, for that I have to do some sort of sacrifice. First of all is that I usually do a couple of things. Okay, yeah, like a recording artifact, reading a book, then kind of like a simply app developer, sorry, brain games. Okay, yeah, brain training, brain workout. Like in this particular micro learning, I'm kind of like a simply play bunch of games like a Duolingo, Elevate, Lumosity, then Brilliant. These are kind of like some applications I use for enhancing my brain power or things like that. Not probably enhancing, but kind of like I utilize those kind of like some application, and it is really fun way to learn all those things and stuff like that. And because of this thing, I spent almost like a 1 and 2 hour into this micro learning application, and then after that app development too. Okay, so I have to be skipped today. I have to be skip all those things today, and after I record this artifact, after I read my book, I kind of like a directly jump into the content creation. And today's target is a make two piece of content today. So that is really big. It's not really big problem, but let's just go through that. All right, yeah, whatever. Let's just jump into the question. Okay, now wait, what is exactly question? Okay, the question is, what if World War I was averted through diplomacy? Oh, averted. What's the averted? Averted means like that ki kind of like a solved by diplomacy. Okay, yeah, diplomacy means like that by talk. So okay, this is a kind of like a very weird question, but let me give you context first. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Okay, yeah. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question are always kind of like a really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like force you to think about that reality. Also, when you try to think, when you try to create that reality, it completely depend on how much knowledge that you have. So it's kind of like a somebody just try to understand what exactly happened and the knowledge and things like that. It's feel really good. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right, and it's not exactly wrong either. It's a kind of like a simply my thought process. It's raw, it's unfiltered, and it's just my opinion. Okay, so be advised, don't take this information as much as seriously. If you need this kind of like information, you have multiple sources, internet, books, lot of things. Collect the sources from there. Do not believe in whatever stuff that I'm saying, because it's my opinion. It's not exactly right. It's unverified. Alright, so let's go. Let's do it. So regarding about this question, what if World War One is actually solved by the diplomacy? Okay, first of all, let's just understand couple of things. Okay, what is actually diplomacy? A diplomacy means like that ki two people basically when there is a conflict happen between the two nation, there is a two way to solve that thing. First way is that be a war, like basically our army and other nation army kind of like a fight with each other, and who will gonna win the army, who will gonna win the battle, they will gonna kind of like a take everything. Okay, yeah, this is the one way. Another way is that key solve through communication. Like basically nation A and nation B kind of like a talk to each other and kind of like a figure it out what they need, what they want, and kind of like a solve those kind of like a some issues with diplomacy. Like what do you have a condition, what I have a condition, and what is at least this thing, that how do we supposed to solve this thing without kind of like a somebody killing somebody or a war or things like that. Diplomacy is always really good to kind of like solve the issues, because it's really essential, it's very peaceful, and it can solve multiple things. Okay, yeah, because when you kind of like a focus on war, then probably as a nation, nation A and nation B both are facing destruction, like in every other possible way, like a destruction of kind of like a cities or humans, people die, both the nations of the people dies and things like that, and it's not really good for both of them. So it's really essential for diplomacy and things like that. It is really essential to talk to each other. But still, this is the kind of like a thought process came after the world war. Okay, yeah, before the world war there is no diplomacy, like people don't really knew it that ki, war can kind of like somebody that the both countries have issues can solve by the talking. They don't really knew that this diplomacy is not even the concept at that time. Okay, now if the World War One is kind of like a solved by the diplomacy, then what would be that? Well, first of all, let's just understand how the World War One happened. Obviously, the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right, is not exactly wrong. I'm trying to explain whatever information that I have. Okay, so according to my information, basically there is a Austrian Prince James Duke Ferdinand was assassinate um, assassinate in another country. I'm not really sure which country is that. Assassinate in another country, and because of that, prince was kind of like a something um, that because of this prince was kind of like a something assassinate in another country. So the Austrian Hungary people are kind of like a something um, kind of like a somebody kind of like a decide a war to that particular country. Okay, yeah, and kind of like a somebody try to kill those kind of like a somebody enemies, or like whoever the kill our prince and things like that, we will gonna take revenge and stuff like that. Before I'm trying to tell you every possible scenario, you just need to understand couple of things first. Okay, I'm talking about 2015, sorry, 1915, 19 sorry 1910. Okay, 1910, almost like a centuries ago. Okay, yeah, at that time, okay, people have only one thought process. They think that the war is the only way that we could extend our empire's boundary, because at that time there is no country, at that time there is just an empire. In Europe there is a Austria Hungary Empire, Ottoman Empire, then Russian Empire. At that time there is no USSR, there is a like a basically Russian Empire. I'm not really sure the name of that empire, but Russian Empire. And then a Britain Empire. Okay, yeah, France Empire too. Okay, there are multiple kind of like a some empire are kind of like a something living on that Europe. Okay, and they always have kind of like a something that key they always knew that they will have to be kind of like a war and things like that. Because let me tell you one thing, at that time, okay, people only think that the sorry about this disturbance, I'm not really sure. Okay, by the way, okay, let me give you context. Okay, yeah, if you are kind of like a listening this sound right now, you are kind of like a listening little less sound. This is what actually happened is because of the Doppler effect. Okay, because sound effect is kind of like a only be more kind of like a somebody be more like a be more kind of like a so much intense when it kind of like a closer, but when it far away it kind of like a little less sound that you will get. This is kind of like a really good example as a Doppler effect. Okay, right now, like listen to this audio. See, right now it kind of like a went loose. This is what actually happened in Doppler effects. Whatever. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing that World War One. Yeah. So first of all, at that time, the empire in the Europe, they always have tendency. They always knew that their empire always have threat from another empire. What do you mean by threat from another empire? Because like let me tell you one thing now. Okay, like basically right now it's a concept that you have to be understand. Okay, a concept that right now we are living in this world, we are living very peacefully. We knew there is a some neighbor countries actually exist. Okay, yeah, even if we don't really like that neighbor, or even if we don't hate or anything at all, still this is our neighbor and we cannot change, we cannot do anything at all. Okay, yeah, we are kind of like equipped with this thought process that our neighbor, whoever the neighbor, we cannot kind of like a something that kill them or things like that. No, this is our neighbor and it always be a neighbor. This is our thought process that most of the kind of like a in 20s people, like basically in like right now people who are actually born in this particular century, they are kind of like a thinking about that yeah, like basically is this thing, we are kind of like living in this, our neighbor should supposed to be exist and it always be a exist. But almost like a centuries ago, people might not think like that way. People thinks that our empire always have threat from another empire, always have threat from another empire. So before they attack us, it should supposed to be it's our responsibility to attack them. Yeah, and this is kind of like assembly one of the really essential factor for that, like one of the really essential. That's why most of the empire are kind of like assembly building a lot of kind of like assembly weapon power, military and things and that and that. And in the world war, in the kind of like assembly in the 1900, like basically 1995 or like a 1905 or at that time almost like a centuries ago, people are always think that we always have threat from another empire. Like a Britain empire thinks that we have threat from Russian empire. Russian empire thinks that we have threat from France empire or Austria Hungary empire or Ottoman empire. We always have threats. Okay, so before they eliminate us, it's our responsibility to eliminate them. But let me tell you one thing, there is no reason for kind of like attacking them. Because of that yes, the every country, every empire has a kind of like a somebody have kind of like a somebody always have stress that might be another empire might gonna kind of like a somebody kill us anytime that they want. Okay, yeah, but they need a kind of like a somebody reason. Okay, yeah, and that reason will establish when the Duke Ferdinand is kind of like a killed in another country. So what exactly happened? The Austria-Hungary Empire, the Austria-Hungary prince, I'm not really sure, is actually kind of like a went at somewhere and kind of like a somebody kill in another country. So at that time, the Austria-Hungary's people are kind of like a something decided to do a war with that particular country. Okay, now let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah, as I mentioned, the at that time war was so common, like legitly so common. Like basically they think if our country or if our empire wanted to kind of like grow their boundaries or things and that, there is only one possible way to do that thing is to kind of like do a war with another countries or another empire. So that's why war is kind of like a something very common over there. Okay, yeah, and usually empire are kind of like a fight with another empire. It's bitterly common. Okay, so because of this thing happened, kind of like a Austria-Hungary Empire are kind of like a somebody attack with this kind of like a somebody, I'm not really sure what is actually empire, but they kind of like a fight with each other. Now this is the one reason. World War One happened is because of multiple reason. Okay, and you have to understand there is what is actually multiple reason. A multiple reason. First reason is that ki Duke Ferdinand are assassinate in. Okay, first. Second reason is that कि each empire has kind of like a something a secret treaty happened with another country. Okay, another empire. Okay, what's a secret treaty? A secret treaty means like that कि if the Austria-Hungary Empire are kind of like a somebody attacked by France Empire, then Russian Empire will gonna protect the Austria-Hungary Empire. Why? Because Austria-Hungary Empire and Russian Empire have a kind of like a secret treaty happened when someone kind of like a somebody try to take a war with us, like someone try to kind of like a somebody something really do a war, like basically this thing the France decided that okay, we should supposed to be kind of like eliminate the Austria-Hungary Empire, and they are kind of like a strike. Then in that particular situation, the Russian Empire will gonna help Austria-Hungary Empire, and they will gonna fight to the France Empire because there is a treaty happened between the Austria-Hungary Empire and Russian Empire. Get it? So there is a secret treaty. It's a kind of like a simply NATO right now we have. Okay, like basically in our today's world, the NATO is a kind of like a organization or kind of like a protecting the kind of like a simply alliance. Okay, like basically in the NATO there are multiple countries are actually involved, like a US, and then France, then Britain, then kind of like a something the most of the European country are actually involved. Okay, yeah. So whoever kind of like somebody attack those NATO countries, then all the NATO country will gonna fight to that particular particular country. Like basically let's just say that ki Russia is kind of like a something nuke, like a nuke the kind of like a something Netherlands, then probably all the NATO countries like US and France, then Britain, then all the countries are kind of like a fight to the Russia because they are kind of like a bounded by treaty of NATO. Okay, yeah. So this is what exactly happened and that period of time that key, like basically right now NATO, like basically whoever the NATO that actually involved, they are arbitrarily open, the information they have is very open. Like basically we actually know that ki which countries are involved in the NATO, and it's the information is very public at the at today. But at that time this is very secretive project, like you don't know which empire have kind of like a secret treaty to which empire. So possibly is this saying that he, if I'm kind of like somebody try to invade the Russia, if I try to invade the Austria-Hungary Empire, then probably suddenly the Russian Empire is kind of like somebody try to invade us, and we don't know why this thing happened. We didn't really kind of like somebody invade the Russian Empire, but still this is kind of like a treaty, that's a secret treaty by the way, and basically only the kind of like a two countries that the treaties actually happened with the two countries, only those people knows. Other than that no one knows that, even if that treaty was so secret that possibly is this thing that only few people knows that thing. Okay, so other countries doesn't really know that which countries has a kind of like a simply alliance with the another countries and things like that, which is kind of like a simply another reason happened. So what is actually happened, what is actually this reason is actually kind of like a simply um, impact a lot is because of that when Duke Ferdinands are kind of like a something assassinated in another country. So Austria-Hungary Empire try to invade that particular kind of like assembly empire. Okay, yeah. Now that particular empire has a kind of like a secret treaty of another empire. Okay, yeah. So that another empire, like basically Russian Empire, and they are kind of like assembly try to invade, like they are try to kind of like help that particular country, and that particular country and the Russian Empire and kind of like they both are kind of like assembly try to fight with the Austria-Hungary Empire. But Austria-Hungary Empire are kind of like somebody have secret treaty with a Ottoman Empire or things like that. So Ottoman Empire are also involved in this war. And because of Ottoman Empire are also in the war, then basically France Empire are also in the war. Because of the Ottoman and France have kind of like a secret treaty, and then after that, because of the France is kind of like have secret treaty with the Britain, then Britain is also kind of like assembly into this war. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key, the one event is kind of like a something create a spark and that ignite the entire European battlefield. Like basically everyone has a secret treaty and everyone are kind of like a fighting without have any kind of like a prior reason or things like that. They just know that they just have to fight and that's it. So in one single moment, it's entire Europe is became battlefield. And it was kind of like one of the crazy reason that World War One happened. Okay, and also again let me tell you one thing. At today's world in 2025, I'm asking this question to myself. I think that how stupid people was that? Like how stupid was that? Like literally just like so stupid. Like basically there is no reason. Like there is nothing really at all. Still we just have a kind of like a secret treaty. That's why we are kind of like a invited in this war and things like that. And that's a really stupid thing, right? Yeah, we are kind of like consider that's a really stupid thing, but at that time that is normal. Let me tell you one thing. I'm trying to explain to you a thought process, the mentality, the people who thinks war is the only way to kind of like assembly prosperous our country, prosperous our empire and things like that. Yeah, because let me tell you one thing. In today's world, our growth is kind of like it depends on multiple factor like educations, healthcare, transportation, lot of things. Okay, yeah, but at that time the growth, the countries of growth, it depends upon eliminate all the threats and that's it. Like basically we should supposed to be kind of like somebody extend our boundaries and things like that. So at that time war was kind of like something very common and very usual and very kind of like people are kind of like expected that ki one day or another day we have to do a war and that's it. They just it's inevitable. It's not gonna stop and things like that. So that's why this people are like basically what I'm trying to tell you. Before the World War One, all the empire are kind of like somebody so much hot. They are already really hot at kind of like somebody try to kill another empire on things and that, but they don't really found any kind of like some reason. The Duke Ferdinand assassination is the reason that create to kind of like a spark that create to the fire to the all the empire and they are started kind of like a killing another empire and things like that, right? So this is kind of like something beginning of the World War One happened. Also information that I try to information that I tell you regarding about this thing is not exactly right, is not exactly wrong. It's my opinion. Okay, if you need any kind of like some information or valid information, go to the internet and things like that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, my information is not exactly precise. Okay, I'm not really sure that key which countries has a kind of like a secret treaty between them. Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to give the example that key Russian and kind of like a Austria-Hungary Empire, they have kind of like a secret treaty, but I'm not really sure. Okay, yeah, but there is a one thing for sure that they have kind of like a secret treaty, like in the European Empire, they have kind of like multiple secret treaty with another nations and things like that. So that's why this kind of like assembly World War One is actually happened. Okay, yeah. Now this scenario, the question is actually tell us. The question is actually kind of like saying this thing that ki, what if that World War One was kind of like a something solved by the diplomacy? Can we able to solve that thing? First of all, at that time, solving the issues in the diplomacy table is not exist at that time. As I mentioned, war is the only one thing that they know that they're responsible for growth and things like that. So there is no kind of like a something that people would kind of like a somebody sit in front of each other and kind of like a talk about their issues and things and that. There is no at all, nothing really at all. They always consider their neighboring empire is always kind of like a threat to us, and one day or another we just have to kind of like kill them. So diplomacy is not even the answer. Diplomacy is not even kind of like some answer what exist over there. Oh yeah, but still from point of perspective, imagine that ki each empire came and they are kind of like assembly talk to each other and they are kind of like a solve the issues and things like that. So what is actually happened? What is actually World War One is actually solved by the kind of like assembly diplomacy. First of all, that key World War Two will not gonna happen. Okay, yeah. First of all, like that World War One is actually kind of like a solved by diplomacy. We shouldn't supposed to be called as a World War One. It kind of like called as a kind of like a something just a global war or kind of like a things that like basically the World War One that we are kind of like a give this name is because of that ki we have kind of like understand how much destruction happened, so that's why we consider as a World War One. But at that time when the war is actually happened, they're just a war. That's it. They're just a war. Okay. Now if this kind of like a diplomacy happened, then probably what is actually is this thing that ki um, World War Two is not happen. Okay, like a World War Two is actually happened is the one of the biggest reason is because of World War One happened. Because the when the World War One kind of like assembly end, the Versailles Treaty is actually happened, and with the Versailles Treaty, the Germany are kind of like assembly responsible for World War One. Like basically, the Allied country are kind of like assembly give the responsible that ki Germany is the only kind of like a country who is responsible for World War One, and they are kind of like assembly pay the repercussion and things and that and that. And this is kind of like a some reason is kind of like a simply for establish the World War Two. Okay, yeah. But World War One is not happened, or maybe World War One is actually solved by diplomacy. Then probably there is no World War Two happen. There is no Hitler rise. Okay, yeah, like a Hitler is just kind of like a, just simply just another kind of like a simply messenger who just kind of like pass the message from one battalion, one military battalion to another military battalion. Okay, yeah, he will not gonna rise. Okay, yeah. Another thing, okay, that ki World War One is kind of like somebody eliminate the empire. Okay, yeah. Like basically at that time there is a multiple empire, Ottoman Empire, Russian Empire, Britain Empire, France Empire, okay, Austria-Hungary Empire. These are kind of like a some multiple empire are kind of like a simply living together in the Europe and things like that. But because of World War One happened, there is a lot of countries are actually evolved and empire. The concept of empire is actually gone. Okay, yeah. Uh, but if the World War One is actually solved by the diplomacy, then we are still living in empire. Okay, we still have a kind of like a king and queen and things and that and stuff like that. Okay. Um, Another thing is that ki I'm living in India. Okay, yeah, and at that time India is a colonized country of a Britain. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing that ki if the World War One is kind of like a simply the solved by the diplomacy, then as a India didn't really get independence. Okay, or maybe it will take time to get independence. Okay, maybe another decade or maybe kind of like a couple of multiple decades after. Okay, yeah, because not just India but as well as kind of like assembly Britain has a multiple colonies. Okay, yeah, in Africa, in Australia, in Asia, and not just a Britain, by the way. France has a multiple colonies too in Africa, in Middle East, and a lot of things. Okay, yeah. Then Russian Empire, like basically at that time Russia is a kind of like a very huge empire regarding about entire the like a basically northern hemisphere. They have kind of like control the everything. Okay, but after the World War One, the Russian Empire kind of like a collapse, and then USSR is actually kind of like established. Okay, yeah. Austria-Hungary Empire is a kind of like a mixture of kind of like a Germany and kind of like Austria or Germany, Austria, and things like that. Okay, yeah. Probably they are also kind of like a somebody disintegrate. But because of World War One is kind of like a solved by diplomacy, then kind of like a something the empire should supposed to be exist. The Ottoman Empire should supposed to be exist. Like one of the biggest thing is that Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire is kind of like a completely collapse and new countries actually emerged. Turkey, then basically Middle East country like Iraq, Iran, then basically a lot of kind of like assembly Israel. These are kind of like countries are actually established after the World War One, but these countries will not gonna establish the World War One because of the World War One is actually solved by the diplomacy. Okay, so most of the kind of like a colonized country will not get independence. Okay, at least like maybe 10 or 20 year or probably multiple decades or things like that. Okay, um but if I'm trying to think about every possible scenario, okay, yeah, this is not exactly right. Okay, yeah, probably is this thing that ki the war is kind of like a like basically is this thing, if the World War One is not happened, then there is no Holocaust happened. Okay, yeah. There is like basically is this thing, there is a lot of good thing that kind of like a something established when the World War One is not actually happened. That is really good thing. But let me tell you one thing now, in our human history, something happened for something right reason, and that is something really essential. Let me tell you one thing. Yes, World War One create lot of destruction. Not just World War One, World War Two create lot of destruction in every possible way. Cities are collapsed, people are die, like millions, almost like a one third population are actually died because of the World War One and Two. Lot of losses happen, and it's just like a chaos in everywhere. Literally just chaos. But it is one of the really essential factor create that we understand the repercussion of the war. Let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah. At that time, people consider war is the only one way that we could supposed to be progress. We could supposed to be kind of like a simply improve our countries or things like that. This thought process is changed after the World War. Yeah, this thought process changed after the World War. Like people are considered that key, we should supposed to be kind of like a solve our issues when we talk to each other, like through diplomacy. These concepts are not even exist before the World War One. So basically, this thought process is actually create after the World War One. This thought process actually create the understand the gravity of what is actually happened after the World War and how much destruction that we face. Because it's not really good in every possible way, but that leads to kind of like a somebody gives you a thought process that war is a wrong thing and we shouldn't supposed to do it again. So after the World War Two, there is no big war is actually happened. Like there is a kind of like a Cold War is actually happened within the US and Russia, but that is a Cold War. There is no kind of like a somebody that came something that kind of like a somebody fighting in the battlefield. No, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah, but still, because of the World War, it's kind of like a somebody try to eliminate the future war. Okay, yeah. So if I'm gonna say that ki World War is kind of like a something solved by the diplomacy, that solution is not exactly right, because one way or another, World War should supposed to be happen. It's a kind of like an inevitable process. Like basically, if you stop at somewhere, it should supposed to be kind of like a start by something, because it's inevitable. It's cannot stop. It happened. It should supposed to be happen. World War One, World War Two is kind of like a something written in our human history chapter that should supposed to be happen. Because if the World War One, World War Two is not actually happened, then probably what I'm trying to tell you, yeah, there is a lot of good, lot of bad thing actually happened, but there is a lot of good things is happened too. Growth. Oh yeah, we invented vehicle. We invented a kind of like assembly flying aircraft. We invented kind of like a radio frequency. We kind of like a try to use such a tool that how do you supposed to eliminate another countries or things like that. Like let me tell you one thing, in this World War One, like basically since the beginning of the 19th centuries, like from since the World War One to World War Two, there is a lot of really good things is actually established regarding about the physics, science, and kind of like understanding about the life and humans and things like that. Like basically, if I'm trying to think about that, ki what if World War One is not actually happened, then probably that's a very wrong concept, because it should supposed to be happen. The Hitler should supposed to be rise. Like basically is this thing, the UN will not gonna establish if the World War One is not actually happened. United Nation. Like basically before the United Nation we have League of Nation. Okay, yeah. But League of Nation is completely fail. Okay, yeah, and they actually understand that key they are like then World War Two is actually happened. But League of Nations and United Nations are really one of the really essential factors are established after the World War Two. Their main purpose is that he kind of like a somebody that the this kind of like a somebody war shouldn't supposed to be happen. So they are kind of like a creating this kind of like a somebody event, or people or every country they are kind of like a talk to each other and kind of like a solve their issues through the table and things like that. Like I don't know, dude, it's like that na ki I'm born in kind of like a something in this world where World War I is kind of like a something just gone. Okay, yeah. But if I'm kind of like a think about all the possible way, and if I have a kind of like a something opportunity to kind of like a something stop the World War I before it happened, or World War II before it happened, should I able to stop? No, I will not. Or like, it happened and it meant to be happen. Because let me tell you one thing, when we try to kind of like assembly eliminate the opportunity to grow, like eliminate to kind of like some like basically we cannot. How do I supposed to explain it? It's a kind of like a things that now everything is actually connected with each other. Everything like each stuff is actually connected with each other. Our thought process, our mind, our human psychology is actually kind of like a grow according to the kind of like a somebody what we face in our history. We learn from our history and we kind of like a prevent that what we should supposed to be happen and what should we shouldn't supposed to be happen. We learn from our mistakes. Like basically I learn from my mistake that what I did make kind of like a mistakes, and human kind of also make mistakes in their life too. And World War I is that kind of like a sort of mistakes, and we should supposed to learn. If we eliminate that mistake, then how do we supposed to learn from that? It's not. Yeah, there is a lot of good thing happened that if World War I is kind of like a solved by diplomacy, but still it's not the kind of like a simply a solution. Nothing really at all. So this is my opinion regarding about World War. Okay, yeah, this is like a yeah. Also, the information that I tell is not exactly right. It's not exactly wrong. It's just my opinion. Okay, yeah. So don't take this information very seriously. If you need any valid information, you have multiple sources. Check them out. This is it. I should supposed to be end here. And thank you.